everybody out and about, and it's sunny, it's snowy, it's just a beautiful day today. Go ahead and open up your Bibles to Matthew chapter 27. Matthew 27 is where we're going to be looking at the first half of this chapter today. Can somebody tell me what is going on right now in Jesus' life and with the apostles and the disciples? What's going on? Catch us up to speed. He's getting ready for his trial, yeah. In chapter 26, we talked about Gethsemane, we talked about the Lord's Supper. Adam walked us through on Wednesday night of Jesus being arrested and his prayers in Gethsemane. And then we watched a little video there at the end. And what did that video depict if you were here on Wednesday night? The end of chapter 26. What happens at the end of chapter 26? Peter denies him. Yeah, right? Remember, if you remember at the beginning of 26, during the Lord's Supper, Jesus tells Peter what? You're going to deny me. And what's Peter's answer? No, not me. And then I think it's interesting in that verse, right? And then all the other disciples agreed, right? It wasn't Peter says it, and then all the rest of them go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Peter. We're right there with you. And then 26 ends, though, with him betraying Jesus and denying him, I should say, not betraying him, denying him 3 times. At 26, somebody read chapter 26 and verse 75. So Peter denies him, and we want to see his reaction here because it's going to lead us very well into chapter 27. All right, what's Peter's reaction to that? Repentance, right? He hears it, he remembers all of a sudden, oh, wait. And if you even saw in the video, and you actually know it in John, when Peter denies him the 3rd time, what happens between him and Jesus? Jesus looks at him, right? Jesus is being moved from the Sanhedrin trial over to Pilate, and as he's being moved is when Peter's denying him, and John says, as he says it, Jesus looks right at Peter. Could you imagine that? That would hurt, right? I think it's interesting. We all know in our lives, right, when we sin, when we rebel against God, we know that affects God, right? But do we actually, see that directly? When your wife looks at you, maybe, right? But did you see it on God's face? Let me put it that way. No, you don't, right? And yet Peter literally sees God, the Son of God, Jesus, his closest friend, look right at him as he does it. I mean, to me, anytime I think about that, that just kind of chills me a little bit. I just could not imagine that. And so you see, Peter just realizes it, and it just says he goes out and he weeps bitterly. And of course, we know as we go along here in the text what happens to Peter, right? Peter repents, he comes back as Jesus wanted him to. Any thoughts on the end of 26 as we move into 27? Yes, Eric. Yeah, exactly, right. And thank you for getting us straight into 27, right? My first thing is we're going to look at Peter and Judas here, right? We're going to compare these. And I think you bring up a very good point is, and we talked about this just in my house the last couple of days, right, is this whole idea, was Peter predestined to do this? Was Judas? No, right? I mean, if you look back in Exodus, was Pharaoh predestined, that Pharaoh specifically, predestined to deny Moses? No. Well, then how did God know it? Because God knows people's hearts. Right? And he knows our attitudes, and he knows the situation. And when people always ask, right, why did Jesus come at a certain time? It's because the time was right? The people were right, and Jesus, so that's why he went, yes. Yeah. right there. Yep. Yeah, and we're going to look at that, and we're actually going to look at that again with Pilate here too, right? We're going to see some things kind of like a Cain situation where somebody comes up to him and says, it's right there, right? Be aware of it. Excellent. All right, any other thoughts? Yes, Derek. To do as a group, right? Not as individually. It's not this person, this person. It's people who follow me are going to conform to my son. Yes, exactly. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into 27. So Jesus has had his trial with the priests, with the Sanhedrin, with the council. They, of course, are wanting to do what? Kill him. Yeah, they're wanting to kill Jesus. What's the problem with that? Just because they want to do it, what's the issue? They can't do it. Why? Legally, they can't, right? Because under Roman law, under Roman occupation, they are not allowed to carry out capital punishment. They have to have some type of approval to do that from the Romans. So now, we're going to get into 27. If somebody wants to read verses 1 through... Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. In fact, you see it, right? He could have ran, as Tyler and Adam pointed out to us. He could have easily just turned the other way and ran, except he goes towards Jerusalem. And I believe Sarah brought it up Wednesday night, right? He, in fact, when they all fall back in John, he has to do what? Tell them, all right, guys, like, do what you're supposed to do, right? They're standing there stunned, and he just like, all right. He's almost encouraging them to let's do this. Let's fulfill the plan here. Very good point. All right, let's read chapter 27. If somebody can look at verses 1 through 10 for us. All right, thank you very much, Eric. Okay, so what time of day is it now? When was Jesus arrested? What time of day was it? Nighttime, right? What time is it now? Not like specifically, but sunup, right? Daybreak is happening. Why do they have to wait till daybreak? The Sabbath, right? There's also Roman law, right? They can't just walk into the prefect's house in the middle of the night, bang on his door and be like, hey, we got some issues we got to go on here, right? We got to take care of this. No, they have to wait under Roman law to daybreak. It's also Sabbath, so they can't hold trials at certain times of the day. So they wait till the daybreak. And what are they doing there in verse 1? I love this. What are they still doing in verse 1? Plotting how to kill him and put him to death, right? It's not even, they have him arrested already, and they're still trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? What does that indicate? What do they know about Jesus? They didn't have the same attitude as Peter, right? There wasn't, hey, let's just go for it and do it. It almost indicates, right, like they know if we bring this guy before the Romans, he's innocent. Right? The Romans are going to look at us and think like, we don't care. You know, just because this guy is breaking some of your religious laws, why does that deserve punishment? And so they take him over to who in verse 2? To Pilate. Okay, who is Pilate? A governor. Okay, what do you guys know about Pilate from history? other than he was governor of Judea at a certain time. He was a Roman pleaser. He was not a people pleaser. He was a Roman pleaser. You look out throughout history, Pilate to the Jews was a very bad guy. Okay, he was probably one of the harshest governors they had during this time period. He would easily kill people just to kill people, because what was Jerusalem known for? Insurrection, right? And we're in fact going to see somebody who's associated with something like that here in a little bit, right? They're known for always trying to rise up, and especially come Passover time, when all the Israelites from all over the world are gathering in one place, it becomes a very tinderbox, right? Huh? Oh, he's a pilot, so he flew? Yeah, I don't know. Right? Leave it to Jim to just throw you off track, you know. Yes. Well, hang on to it. Yep. We'll find out. Yep, we'll find out. We'll get there. So Pilate, right, he's not a friend to the Jews. But the Jews know that we have to go to this guy and convince him to kill Jesus. Okay, that's the situation they're in. Pilate is known for putting down uprisings. He is petrified of something happening in Jerusalem at this time. Because if Judea get out of control for the Romans, who's going to be responsible for that? He is. And it's not a good responsibility. It's not like, oh, please, get this. No, they will kill him if he does not keep this under control. They will get rid of him. All right, so then we have a little break, right? We see, okay, they take him here, and it's almost like this. Oh, by the way, who then do we talk about in verse 3? Judas. Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned. Okay, so all of a sudden Judas sees, oh, they're going to kill him. Question: is Judas a bad guy? Is Judas a bad guy? Is he like just an evil, no more than us, right? He's an opportunist, right? Yeah. Exactly, right? Think about this. Did Judas follow Jesus for the last 3.5 years? Yeah. Was he chosen? By who? Jesus specifically chose Judas, right? We're not told how, but we do know with other apostles, he directly looks at them and says, follow me. So you can assume that he probably did that to Judas too. You're with me. Did Judas perform miracles? Yeah, right? He sent out all 12. Judas is one of those. Did Judas eat with Jesus? Yes. Did Judas get his feet washed? Yes. So then why does Judas betray Jesus? Is it because he's evil? He was remorseful, right? He's even remorseful, right? He sees it, right? The best thing I heard, and it was kind of funny how just certain things just pop up on your videos, when you're scrolling through YouTube, was this guy talking about Judas. He said the problem with Judas was Judas's love of money was more than his love of God. And that's what got Judas in trouble. Yes, Wendell. Yeah, we see in other scriptures, right? He was the money keeper, and he was known for, skimming a little off the top, right? But that was Judas's issue. He wasn't going, oh, I'm going to sneak in here, I'm going to get with the 12, I'm going to wait kind of 3.5 years, and then we're going to do this. No. Judas's issue was the same issue we all have, which is what? There's something in this world that we love more than we love God. And we have to look at Judas. I think a lot of times we look at Peter and Judas and we go, oh, Peter did the right thing, Judas did the wrong thing, and we just kind of leave it at that, right? The point of it here is Judas was also remorseful. Because we see in Matthew, what does he see that makes him full of remorse there in verse 3? Seeing that Jesus had been what? Condemned. Almost giving the indication, right, that Judas was just thinking, kind of like Julie said, oh, he's going to get arrested. They're maybe beat him, talk to him, whatever. Maybe just throw him in prison like they did with John the Baptist. Just leave him there. Almost like he didn't expect him all of a sudden to be like, oh, all right, we got to go to the Romans now and get this guy killed. How many times have they already tried to arrest Jesus? And we see in Matthew, it says what? Jesus just slips through the crowd, just walks away. Right? But then Judas, like Peter, he's remorseful. But what's Judas's reaction to his remorse? He didn't repent, right? Yeah, and that's the issue. We see Peter goes out and weeps, and his story just kind of ends there and then picks up later in Matthew. Judas is sorrowful, he's remorseful, but not enough to the point where he then gets on his knees and looks at God and says, I am sorry, right? He does what? What does he do? He kills himself, right? Yes, Tim. Yeah, exactly, right. He had his own plans. And little did he know that God was going to use Judas's plans to then carry out his own plans, right? And we see that throughout all the Bible where people have their own ideas thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, and God's just going to say, okay, I can use that, right? Before he kills himself, what does he do? He returns the money, right? And he even says in verse 4, what does he even say in verse 4? I have sinned, right? He acknowledges what he's done. But again, like Tyler said, right, you can acknowledge, you can be sorry, but unless your heart actually changes, does it really do any good? No, it doesn't, right? How many times do you, right, if you've raised kids, you look at your child and you say, what'd you do? Oh, I'm sorry, right? I'm sorry, I won't hit my sister again, you know. I won't hit my brother again. I won't make fun of him. And then what do you see them doing like the next day? Hitting them, making fun of them again. Yeah, the next minute, right? If you make it to the next day. If they're truly sorrowful, they'll make it to the next day. Yes, Ben. Yeah. We don't. Yep. Oh, definitely, right. If you look at, suicide, right? Most people say, right, it's because they feel like there's no one out there that cares, right? He's looking, he's saying, I betrayed the Messiah. He's now going to die. Okay, well, I can't go back to the apostles or to Jesus, even though he could have. But, that's just his mind thinking. So he goes, okay, well, I'm going to go to the people then who paid me. Surely they'll, at least... like, hey, yeah, sorry, we kind of played you. No, he throws it to them, and what's their reaction? You don't care. What's that to us? So now he's thinking, I have nowhere, right? He's looking to men to go to somewhere to get some type of absolution. He's not getting it from men when he could have gone to God and gotten it, but then it causes them just to be like, all right, I'm done. Greg, did you have a comment? Back. Yeah. Right. And again, I think that's the point is why Matthew puts this in here is we all have something in our lives. It may not be money, right? It could be our job. It could be our family. It could be anything that you look at and say, God, I love you, but, I love this more. And, I'm going to do what I want to do with this, right? And we all have to be careful about that. Any other thoughts on Judas before we move on? Yeah, exactly, right. It's blame somebody else. I give up. I'm done with this, right? Just, again, it's almost like you look back at 26, right? Peter's words were, I'm not going to do this, right? But then when the rubber met the road, what did he do? He did it, right? Your actions and your heart all go together. You can be like Peter, have the right heart, or Judas almost, right? And have this kind of attitude, but then It's how you react with that. Do you give up? Do you just keep doing it because I'm just going to do it anyway? Or do you truly actually repent and move forward with it? Very good point. Okay, so he throws the money at their feet, and what do the elders say with the money? Whoo! Right? We can't do nothing. All of a sudden now they care about this money. We can't do nothing with it. This is blood money, right? 30 pieces of silver. What's interesting about that amount, if you know the Old Testament? It's prophecy. It's the price of a slave. Yeah, in Exodus we see when Moses is giving the law, if your ox goes out and kills somebody's slave, you then kill the ox first off, right? Because it's a bad ox. So you kill that, and then you pay the owner of the slave 30 pieces of silver, right? And then Jesus is sold for how much? 30 pieces of silver, right? Again, to the Jewish reader that Matthew is reading to, they're going to know that. They're going to know, whoa, 30 pieces. The Messiah is no more than a slave, money-wise, right? So they give it back, and what do the elders say? They say they can't put it in the temple, so we're going to do what? Yeah, we're just going to buy a field, right? We'll buy a field that we can just bury people in, called the field of blood. And Matthew says there in verse 8, it's called the field of blood to this day when he was writing. Where is this prophecy found in verses 9 and 10? Jeremiah, okay? Why did Jeremiah buy a field? This is interesting. Jeremiah chapter 32. If somebody wants to read Jeremiah 32, verses 6 through 9 for us. There's a reason why Jeremiah buys this field. Perfect. Okay. So Jeremiah kind of gets a message, right? And what does God say? He says, somebody's coming. Who's coming? It's his cousin, Hanamel, right? And he goes, buy the field from Hanamel for 17 shekels, which is, right? Back then they didn't have coins, so they just used weights, about 30 pieces of silver. And he says, go ahead and buy it from him. Why? What is Jeremiah prophesying first off? He's prophesying about the what? The return, right? The return of who? Of Judah, right? He's saying, Jeremiah's book is about Judah, you're going to fall, you're going to go to Babylonian captivity. And here in chapter 32, what he's saying is, go ahead and buy land. Why would you buy land if you know you're going to be destroyed? If you knew the fires in California were going to happen, and I said, hey, go buy some oceanfront property down there a week before it happens, why would you do that? Make sure you have insurance, yeah. But why would you do that? You wouldn't, right? You're really like, no, it's going to burn up. Why would I do that? God tells Jeremiah, buy this land from your cousin, even though you know they're going to go off in captivity. Why? What else does Jeremiah know? Julie already said it. He knows they're going to come back. So God has Jeremiah buy this field to show Israel there is going to be redemption. You are going to come back to this land. So buy the land, because when you guys all come back, now Jeremiah, it's in your family. You own it. Why would Matthew bring that up here in 27 verse 10, 9 and 10? Hey, by the way, remember this prophecy of Jeremiah. Why would he say that? What do you think? He's going to come back, right? Israel, you are now in the midst of a horrible situation. You don't even realize it yet. But redemption is right there for you. Right? It's going to be okay. God is coming to save you. right? If you want to be saved, as we saw with the Babylonians, right? Not everybody came back, but if you want to, you can still come back. Any other thoughts on this? There was a price, right? There's a price to be paid. Yep, exactly. Any other thoughts? Yes, Derek. In verse 9, it says, then that what was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. It's actually a quote of both. It's Zechariah 11, verses 12 and 13, and Jeremiah 32, 6 through 9. He's actually blending two things there. Yours doesn't. And is that your Jewish Bible? Nice. I like it. I love your Bible. Spoke of, yeah. Who has Zechariah and who has Jeremiah? Anybody? You have Jeremiah? Jeremiah. Anybody else have Zechariah? You have Zechariah, Barbara? Anybody else? Yes, you're both right. Honestly, you are, because it's actually a blending of Zechariah 11, verses 12 and 13, and Jeremiah 32, 6 and 9. Right? Again, doesn't matter which prophet you're talking about. And recorded by Zechariah. Yeah, they're both, I looked at both verses, they're pretty much the exact same thing. Zechariah is a little bit more judgment, and Jeremiah is more redemption in those prophecies. That's pretty much the only difference. 30 pieces of silver, yes. Yep. And the potter's field is then mentioned in Jeremiah. Yeah. All right, any other thoughts, questions? Thank you, Derek. All right, moving on. Okay, let's look at Pilate's questions here. Okay, so they take him to Pilate. Then we look at Judas, and now back to Pilate here. Somebody read verses 11 through 14. Okay, so here's Pilate, the wonderful governor of Judea at this time. For quite a while, there was actually questions of whether Pilate was actually a real person. You read about him here in the Bible. It's pretty much all they had to go off of. But in 1961, they found this cool little tablet. This can be found in a museum in Israel, right? And this tablet actually says, building of Pilate, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. Okay, and it's actually dated right around, I believe, like 2930 AD. Okay, so right in the time frame everybody thought he was ruling, between 26 and 36 AD. This stone fits it, actually written saying, yep, Pilate, this building, prefect of Judea. Okay, so again, it's interesting how we always question certain things, and all of a sudden, artifacts just kind of pop up, right? You know, saying, oh yeah, look, this guy was real. Okay, so what's his question to Jesus here in Matthew? There's a lot of questions he actually asked, but let's just look at Matthew here. What's his question that he asked in Matthew specifically? Are you king of the Jews, right? And what's Jesus' answer? It is as you say so, right? Why would that be the question Matthew would focus on? Because we see in John, he asks a whole bunch of questions. But why do you think this is the question Matthew would record? Yeah, right, exactly. What's the whole title of this whole series, right? The kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew's idea, right? It's the Jews, it's the kingdom. So Matthew is going to focus on that question that Pilate asked him. And it's the question, really, Matthew's been building up to this whole book, this whole letter. He's been building up to this question. Are you the king of the Jews? And what's Jesus' answer? Yes, I am. You say it, right? And again, it's interesting. How many times have we seen somebody outside of the kingdom acknowledge Jesus for who he actually is? Pilate's doing it here and he doesn't even realize it. Right? How many times do we see somebody go up to Jesus and say, Jesus, son of David, Messiah, who's not a Jew in Matthew? Quite a few times, right? And then here's Pilate, an enemy of the Jews by their accounts. And he looks at Jesus and says, are you the king? And Jesus says, you say it. Right? You got it. And while Jesus answers that question, what are the chief priests and elders doing? Just throwing accusations at him, right? Oh, he said he's going to do this. He said he's going to do that. And as Jim said, what's Jesus' answers here to all that? Nothing. He doesn't answer. This harkens back to Isaiah 53, where Isaiah says, right, a sheep before shears does not even open her mouth. Right? It's that idea of just Jesus being the sacrificial lamb, right? He's not even going to say a word. And what does that, though, do to Pilate? Pilate looks at Jesus and he says, did you hear all this? Right? What would we do? If somebody was looking at you going, Judge, they were speeding, they hit a guy, they did this, they did that, they said they were going to overthrow you, Judge, they were going to start a rebellion, they were going to do all these things, what would you be doing? I'd at least be saying that's not true. These guys are liars, right? At the very least. And Jesus sits there in silence. And so much so that Pilate is what? He's amazed by it, right? Just kind of like, and again, the reason why is because Pilate has seen this already. There have already been, quote, messiahs, Christs, people who have tried to free Jerusalem and Judea and the Israelites from Roman occupation. And he sees the way they react, which is a very human way, right? And then he sees Jesus. Something about the way Jesus is reacting is completely different than what he's seen before. So much so that he's like, okay, something's not right here. Any other thoughts on this little section? Yeah, Derek and then. You good?
So if you remember, Jesus refers to the leadership of Israel really as children of their father, the devil. And we know that Satan is painted as an accuser. And here they have taken this very literally by making nothing but these accusations against him to try to bring judgment upon his name. So I find that incredibly fascinating and parallel. And we see actually this image of Joshua in Zechariah 3, who the images of one who is the high priest, right? Who is being accused by Satan. So it's an interesting parallel that you see there being fulfilled by this group of leaders.
Yeah, exactly. If you guys didn't hear that, I'll try to surmise as well as you did. Yeah, Derek says, right, it's interesting that Jesus calls the elders and the scribes, right, sons of the Father, right, referring to the devil. He's saying, you're just like sons of the devil. And what is the devil known as? He's known as the accuser. And what are they doing here with Jesus? Accusing him, right, saying, oh, look how bad he is, look how bad he is, right? It's almost like they're playing out exactly what Jesus said they are. Yes, Wendell, did you have a comment? Yeah, exactly, right? Jesus, if you look at it, right, Jesus already got his answer to this trial back in the garden, didn't he? Jesus prays, right? The first prayer is, please let this pass, let this be removed, right? And then the second time, though, it's, okay, this isn't going to be removed, so please just be with me through this. Jesus has already pleaded his case to the one who can actually save him, right? His Father, to God. And so he knows, okay, God's already said no, so almost like, right, like, I'm going to argue with you. It's pointless, right? This is the plan. This is what I've accepted this. Yes, very good point, Wendell. All right, any other thoughts? Okay, let's get to the fun stuff, as if that hasn't already been fun. Okay. If somebody wants to read Matthew 27, verses 15 through 26. Finish this up here. Thank you very much, Tyler. Okay. So Pilate kind of gets his trial, gets his answers. Now you're out in the public, kind of the public square here. Pilate, what is a custom during the Passover that Pilate does for the Jews? What does he do? He'll release somebody, right? And they get to choose. You know, he'll usually put some prisoners before them, and then they get to choose who they want. So he goes, okay, here we go. I know how I'm going to do this. I know how I'm going to get Jesus out of this. So they have a couple of prisoners. What does it say in verse 16? Who does he put Jesus up against for this choice? Barabbas. What does your version says? Mine says a notorious prisoner. Does anybody else have anything different? Well known, right? He puts up somebody that is very well known. We see in the other texts, he was known for starting rebellion, for murder, for pretty much you name it, Barabbas has done it, okay? Which is interesting, right? That Pilate says, okay, you have this guy who I know tried to start a riot, in a sense, for death in Barabbas, who's actually supposed to be executed today. And what's the question, though? He says, who do you want? Do you want Jesus, who is called what? The Christ. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, he says, here's Barabbas, right, who everybody knows what Barabbas has done, or do you want Jesus, the Messiah? Who do you want? And why does he ask that question? In verse 18, it says, it gives us the reason why. What did he know about the elders and priests? What were they doing there? Why did they hand Jesus over? Envy, right? It's interesting that we see that throughout Matthew again, he's telling us, right, oh, they did this for envy, they did this for envy, they did this for envy. And we all kind of look at it like, well, of course we know. God knows they did it for envy, right? But here you see Pilate, who's pretty much just thrown into this situation, and he can even in one day, in a few hours, look and see, all right, you guys are just doing this because you're envious of this guy. Right? It's plain to everybody. It's not just a God thing that God is telling us. Everybody can see how the elders and the chief priests feel about Jesus. Now, while he's sitting there, he asks this question, and then what happens? Who comes up to him? His wife. And Matthew's the only spot we get this in. What does his wife tell him? Have nothing to do with this innocent or righteous man, depending on your translation. So she, who hasn't even been anywhere near this trial, walks in and goes, leave this guy alone. Why does she say that? She had a dream. What was her dream? Good. Nobody raised their hand. All right. Good job. That was a trick question. You guys are paying attention. We don't know. We do not know. There's no scripture. There's nothing. The only place we hear about her is here in Matthew, and all we know is she had a dream, and whatever that dream, that vision was, it was God telling her, this guy is innocent. This guy is righteous. And she suffered for it, right? Like, whatever her dream was, it terrified her to the point where she says, I'm suffering because of this guy. He's innocent. Don't touch him. Here's an interesting thing that I didn't really come across until yesterday. Did Pilate know for a fact Jesus was innocent? You can think so, right? There's a lot of different things that you're like, it kind of seems like he's on the edge here. It isn't until his wife shows up that he knows for a fact that he's innocent. Right? Romans and Greek culture took a lot of stock into visions and into dreams and into things like that. They saw those as the gods talking to you, right? She's not saying Yahweh told me this. She's saying our gods, our Greek gods have, right? That's how she's seeing this dream. They're telling me this, and you need to stop. So Pilate is now being told, this guy is innocent, and yet what does he still do? He still puts it before the people. Pilate's not the type to look at the Jews and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you guys think? No, Pilate kills people just for blinking at them wrong if they're not Roman. Right? That was historically this type of guy. And yet in this situation, even when it's his wife telling him, don't touch him, he's innocent, he still puts it before the people. Why? We see that in verse 24. What does he notice in verse 24? A riot is starting. Right. And again, just like Judas, what does he love more than what's right? Not much different. Yeah, it's all about power. It's all about how can I keep my position, get me out of this situation, and not let anything happen, right? He goes, okay, I can kill this innocent man that my wife is having a dream about, or I can free him and then watch a riot happen, and now I'm in trouble with Caesar. And my job, my life is now on the line, right? So he takes, okay, well, one man dies for the whole group, we're good, right? Almost like somebody had already said that back in Matthew, right? Again, it's this idea of one person dying for the humanity, right? From Pilate's point of view, from the chief priest's point of view, from our point of view, right? Does anybody know? So, okay, before we get too deep into this. So then what does Pilate do? He puts it before the people. What's the people's reaction? He says, who do you want me to release? What's the people's reaction? Barabbas. And Pilate again, are you sure? He's the Christ. In verse 22, and then what do they say? Crucify him, right? It's not even, no, give us Barabbas. It's, no, we're sure crucify Jesus, right? We all know what we're in on this. We know the outcome of this choice. Just go ahead and crucify him. And then he even says, why? He hasn't done anything wrong. He keeps asking him, like, are you sure he's your Christ? Are you sure? Are you sure he's your Messiah? He hasn't done anything wrong. And they go, oh, no. And finally, he sees that a riot starting, so he goes, washes his hands, right, which is a symbol of, this is on you guys. Let's get into the fun stuff. Let's go. Does anybody know what the name Barabbas means? Adam, don't answer, because I'm sure you know, and Tyler, I'm sure you know, and Derek, you know. So don't answer. All right. Anybody know what the name Barabbas means? Son of the Father. Okay, so Bar means son. Okay. Abba means, we've all heard this one, father. Okay. So Barabbas' name literally is son of the Father. That's weird. What is Jesus called? Son of God. Son of the Father with a capital F. If you notice there, I put it 2 lowercase letters. I did that intentionally. So you have Barabbas, son of Father, and Jesus, son of the Father, put up together. Right? Here's your choice. You get 2. Okay? Does anybody know anything about the Day of Atonement? Back in Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 16. Go ahead and turn back there. There was 2. Yes, Leviticus 16. We're going to see 2 more things. So Leviticus chapter 16, I'm going to start in verse 6. All right, we got to get through this fast. Okay. Leviticus 16. God is giving instructions to Moses about the Day of Atonement. He says this in verse 6. He says, Aaron will present the bull for sin offering and make atonement for himself and his household. Next, he will take the 2 goats and place them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And after Aaron casts lots for the 2 goats, one for the Lord and one for an uninhabitable place, he's present the chosen goat by lot for the Lord and sacrifice it as a sin offering. But the goat chosen by the lot for the uninhabitable place is presented alive before the Lord to make atonement with it by sending it into the wilderness and to the uninhabitable place. And we'll stop there. You can read the rest all the way through verse 22 through the rest of the chapter. On the Day of Atonement, you get a choice of what? 2 what? 2 goats. You get 2 of the exact same thing. And Aaron is going to cast lots. What does casting lots mean? It's kind of random choice, right? Random choice. You don't know what it's going to be. He's going to put his hands on one and release it out into the wilderness as a sin offering. What's he going to do with the other one, though? He's going to kill it as an offering to the Lord. As the sin offering to the Lord, he's going to kill that lamb. You have a son of the Father, Barabbas. You have a son of the Father in Jesus. Two sons of the Father. What does Pilate give him? Two choices. Right? Here's your choice. And what does he do with one? What does he do with Barabbas? Lets him go. Do we know what happens to Barabbas after this? Nope. He just, for all intents and purposes, if you're reading this, yeah, if you watch a movie you might, right? But you don't know, right? We don't know. He just basically gets, for lack of a better term, sent out into the wilderness, forgotten about. What happens to Jesus? He's executed as a what? As a sacrificial lamb, as a sin offering. Yep, yeah, then he beats him. But yeah, and again, as a reader of Matthew, as a Jew, do they know what the Day of Atonement is? Do they know about the whole two goats and this? Yeah, it's a huge part of their religion, of their culture. And then they read here, or they even see literally, two sons of the Father. One gets to go free, the other one gets to die in his place. And that's what Matthew, right, as we've seen through this whole book, is doing, taking things from the old law, what God is doing. Here's what you saw in the old law, here's what I intended it for. Here's what it is, right? You really want to get into it, read the whole book of Hebrews. It's all about that. Right? But again, it's this idea of Jesus literally taking the place of someone who deserved it a lot more than he did. Right? Barabbas was supposed to die that day. I heard a sermon one time saying, right, imagine you're in a prison, everybody outside you can hear yelling, crucify him, and then you get brought out and you see another guy standing there. And then they go, who do you want? And they point to the other guy and say, crucify him, let him go. And then you're set free. Right? That's what happened to Barabbas. Right? And that's what happened to us. Right? Jesus literally took his place and took our place because of God. Any other thoughts, questions? We got about 30 seconds. Awesome. Thank you all very much. And then Adam will pick us up on Wednesday.